everyone, welcome back. My name's Dana. This is my channel Bookish Die, and today I am wrapping up my last month of reading in 2021. So I read 4 books in the month of December. This is less than I had hoped. I had taken the last half of the month off, and I had been really hoping to, finish 2021 out on a strong note. But I just didn't really feel like reading. I think I was just kind of burned out on 2021, to be honest. And also I was visiting family that I hadn't seen in about 2 years. So, spending time with them and not necessarily knitting or not necessarily doing a lot of like book reading. But I did enjoy everything I read. I don't think I rated anything less than a 3.5 stars. So overall, again, continuing a trend from the last few months, quality-wise, it's been really good. Pretty good. Quantity-wise, not so much. But I'll talk a little bit more about that during my 2021 wrap-up, which should be going up in the next week or so. But anyway, 4 books in the month of December. Let's get into it. The first book I read in December was All the Feels by Olivia Dade. This is a contemporary romance, and it is the sequel to Spoiler Alert, which I read and enjoyed last year. So this novel centers on Alex, who is a TV actor, and he plays Cupid on Gods of the Gates, which is a big budget fantasy adaptation of a fantasy book series that went past its source material. And if that sounds very familiar, it is 100% intentional by the author. And so Alex is unsatisfied with the plot lines for his character in the last season. And then the female lead is named Lauren, and she is a former emergency room counselor who has quit her job and is really burned out and had gone to Spain ostensibly for a vacation. But then after Alex gets into a bar fight, she gets roped into being his minder by her cousin, who is one of the showrunners and a grade A piece of shit. I really enjoyed this. I really liked Spoiler Alert, and I think I liked this one better because Spoiler Alert had some like secret identity things that aren't my favorite, but I really enjoyed Alex and Lauren's relationship. And if you're worried about this potentially being an employee-employer type romance, don't worry about it. The professional relationship gets dissolved before they start dating or get together romantically, which I appreciated. So one thing that I liked about this book is that you see the characters learning to be kinder to themselves, which I think is really valuable. So with Alex, you find out things about his past that I won't get into because it is a bit spoilery, but he has been kind of mentally beating himself up about it. And so part of it is him needing to learn to be kinder about himself and what happened in the past. And then with Lauren, it's learning that she has value and that she should take charge of what she should be able to articulate what she wants and be able to make herself a priority in a way that she hasn't necessarily done so in the past. And so I really liked watching them grow. Big harpy energy is a phrase used throughout this novel and is delightful. I will say one of my complaints about this was in the marketing, as well as in the fic that Alex writes about his characters. There's a lot of talking about pegging and the peg that was promised, and it does not happen. And I do feel like that was a missed opportunity. But overall, I really enjoyed this book. I thought that the writing was good. I really enjoyed the romance. I really liked the characters, as well as the side characters, and getting to see Alex and Lauren just become more of themselves throughout the story. So I gave this 4.5 stars. I really like Olivia Dade's writing. I do think I want to go back and read her backlist, as well as keep an eye out on the 3rd book in this companion series, which I don't know when it's coming out. I know it is, but I can't wait to see what happens with it. The second book that I read in the month of December was another contemporary romance, Donut Fall in Love by Jackie Lau. This follows two Chinese Canadian folks. One is Ryan. He is an actor. He had been on a quirky sitcom that didn't last long but gained a cult following, and has just released a rom-com and is dealing with that, as well as the grief from his mother's recent passing. And then you have Lindsay, who is a baker, and she and Ryan literally run into each other as their first meeting. And Ryan then decides, as a way to honor his mother, to sign up for a Nailed It-esque baking show called Baking Fails, if I'm remembering correctly, and ask Lindsay to teach him how to bake so he doesn't embarrass himself on the show. Feelings occur, they fall in love, there's the third act breakup, which it is what it is, and they get back together. And yeah, overall, I did enjoy this. So I've read a couple of Jackie Lau's self-published romance novellas, and I liked them. And so I was really interested to see what she'd do for her I believe this is her trad pub debut. And I liked it. I thought that Ryan and Lindsay were very well done characters. I really enjoyed their supporting cast. So one thing, and this isn't something I've necessarily found in some of the recent romances that I read, but definitely in romance and ones that I've read earlier this year, sometimes it feels like the side characters aren't really developed and you don't get a sense of who the lead's non-romantic community is. And with this book, that wasn't the case. I definitely got a sense of, who their families are, what their relationship with their families and friends are, what they're doing with them, and they all played important roles, which I really appreciated. I really liked the explorations of grief in this. So with Ryan, his grief is his mother passed within the last 6 months, so it's very present. And then with Lindsay, her father had passed several years before the start of the story, and so it's still there, and she's still dealing with navigating that post-parental death world. And yeah, the food in this one was amazing. Was very well described, which is what to be expected with a Jackie Lau novel. I will say I don't like donut. I'm not a big donut person, but I was very hungry while reading this book. I do think there were times that the relationship felt a little like fast-tracked, but that's maybe just me. For the most part, I really liked this. I thought that it was a fun... It was well written. I enjoy the relationships. I definitely want to see what more Jackie Lau does, either with traditional publishing or with her self-published stuff. So I gave this 3.75 out of 5 stars. I would very much recommend it if you're looking for a fun contemporary romance, or if you want something that lovingly describes matcha tiramisu donuts. Yeah, this is good. The third book that I read in the month of December was a cozy mystery, Mango, Mamba, and Murder by Raquel V. Reyes. So this centers Miriam Quinones-Smith, who recently received her PhD in cultural anthropology, specifically dealing with food. And she's moved back to Miami from New York with her husband and toddler because her husband got a job with the family business. And so she is kind of staying at home, trying to acclimate to living in a very waspy community that's very different than the Cuban-American community she grew up in, and reconnecting with some old friends and family along the way. And while this is happening, she witnesses a death that turns out to have some suspicious characteristics and gets involved in a murder investigation. So it's been a while since I've read a cozy mystery. I used to read them a lot more often, but I did like this one. I enjoyed the fact that this is really centered in the main character's Cuban-American heritage. So one thing with a number of traditionally published cozy mysteries is that they are very white, and a lot of times they are set in like small towns. It's like a woman who's just moved from a big city or has always lived in a small town. And so I liked that, one, the protagonist was a woman of color, and two, that it was set in a larger city. And so the community that she's living in does have some of the characteristics of a small town, but it's still set in the wider Miami region. And I liked, so that's kind of how the author kept the fish out of water, is that Miriam is a woman of color in a very white community and navigating that. I liked the community that Miriam builds herself. So some in the community that she's living in, but also reconnecting with her cousin and her aunt and uncle, as well as an old high school friend. I thought the mystery was fine. I don't normally read cozy mysteries for the mystery. I read them for the characters, and I thought for the most part the characters were fairly well done. I wasn't completely sold on the romantic relationship between Miriam and her husband. Like, her husband is fine, but I think partially because of some of the plots within the book, you just didn't get a really good sense of who he was, and he also just kind of felt like he had no spine. So I didn't really like the relationship, but I really liked Miriam. I liked the characters. It was fun. I gave it a 3.5 stars. I will say, if you do read this book, try and find some Cuban food or like Puerto Rican food, because I made the mistake of reading this while traveling or like on a plane. I'm just like, on the plane, I'm like, I would kill for some tostones right now. I'd kill for some ropa vieja or an empanada, and I couldn't get it. So don't make my mistake. Please read this when you have ready access to delicious food. And the last book that I read in the month of December was Bespouting by Margaret Rogerson. This is a YA fantasy novel, and it centers on a young nun, Artemisia, who is living in this fantasy world where the dead are very present, and she's been trained as a nun to help lay the dead to rest, a Grey sister, and her convent is attacked by soldiers being possessed by undead spirits, and in order to protect her fellow nuns, she bonds herself with a revenant, and then she has to go she goes on an road trip to try and find out what is causing the undead to be so unquiet. I really liked this. So I read her the author's previous novel, Sorcery of Thorns, and enjoyed this. And I had heard that this book was Venom with a nun and a revenant, so I'm like, that sounds good. And so it's that, but it also has some of the same vibes as Sabriel in the Old Kingdom trilogy, which I enjoyed because the Old Kingdom books are some of my favorites. And yeah, I really enjoyed the main characters. So Artemisia and the Revenant just have really great like banter with each other, and I really liked the fact that there is no romance, but along the way Artemisia becomes friends with people and learns like, hey, I can become friends with people and I can have these meaningful relationships with them. So I really liked that. So one of the characters, Marguerite, becomes fairly important to the story, and then you have Charles and Jean, who are two soldiers that Artemisia meets throughout the story or throughout her journey. So I liked that. I thought that I really liked the relationship between her and the Revenant. It was fun. The world building, things were a little vague. So this is the first part in a duology, I believe. So I don't know if some of the questions that I have about the world are going to be answered later on. But for the most part, I enjoyed this. I had originally borrowed this from the library, but I got my own copy just because I liked it so much. I did want to reread it. So yeah, I gave this 4.25 out of 5 stars, and I would really recommend this if you're looking for a YA fantasy that has no romance in it. If you're just looking for like similar vibes to Venom, similar vibes to the Old Kingdom trilogy, would recommend it in that case. So that was my December on books. Only 4, but I enjoyed them, all of which I would recommend to different people. So do any of these books sound good to you? Have you read any of the books? Do you have opinions on them? Please let me know in the comments below. And if you like what you see, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Me and Leia, who does not want to be perceived, would thank you. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.